transfiguration of Jesus is so important in Christian faith and life and theology that it actually has 2 feast days. We recognize it always on this, the last Sunday after the Epiphany, and we read the story of not only Jesus' transfiguration, but of Moses' transfiguration when he comes down from the mountain with the 10 commandments. Wow, I just added 2, didn't I? With the 10 commandments. And we also celebrate it on August 6th, which is kind of the traditional day. Orthodox and Roman Catholic and Anglicans kind of disagree on whether it should be the 6th or the 9th of August, but in our case it's set for the August 6th date. So the Transfiguration is really important. And frankly, it makes a really good vision of this. You know, it's so magnificent to imagine this. You know, it's made for the screen. Jesus glowing, just so on fire with God that he's just literally radiating light from him. And Moses and Elijah standing with him as they talk about exactly what's happening. One of the things that we don't know is that maybe this is the first Jesus really understands about how he's going to die. Maybe it says that Moses and Elijah were talking to him about his departure and what he was about to accomplish. Peter and James and John, bless their hearts, want to stay there. They have a festival, Jewish festival, Festival of Booths, and they said, let's make booths and we'll stay right here. This is amazing. And then they're terrified when the cloud descends on them and they hear the voice of God. Listen to him. Now this to them would have been extremely unusual, but it's not unheard of because Moses is transfigured when he sees God. In the story, Moses asked to see God, and God said, you know, you can't handle it. The human is not capable of seeing the divine. So Moses kind of talks God into showing the very back of God. So he's hidden in a crevice, and God passes by, and he sees just the very, very back of God. And from then on, he glows. He just glows. Rays of light come from him, so much so that people are kind of freaked out by him, and he wears a veil most of the time. He wears something to cover his face so people can kind of deal with this guy. He takes it off when he sees God, when he's talking to God, when he's in the temple. He does these things when he's at the tabernacle. And even in our windows, we see the traditional depiction of Moses with horns of light. The Latin translation translated rays into horns. And so he's always depicted. If you go into an art museum and you see a picture of somebody from the Old Testament that looks like from the Old Testament, and they have these 2 horns of light coming out of their head, that's Moses. So Moses glows for the rest of his life. But Jesus, when the glory leaves, when Moses and Elijah leave, there's no mention that he glows. I mean, there isn't any indication, and I really think that people would have remarked upon it. So why is Moses different from, Jesus different from Moses? Why wouldn't Jesus be even, in essence, more transfigured? Well, one thing we could say is, Jesus had the 100% divine part of him, and so maybe that part is capable of seeing God and at the same time not being consumed with the light. I actually think it's something that it's teaching us. Jesus, when he comes down the mountain, immediately the next day, heals a boy who is completely taken over by a demon. Now we would go look at this and say, well, he probably had epilepsy. The fact is that this boy was being tormented. He was being completely tormented. His father is heartbreaking. There's no relationship that people aren't going to want to be around the kid who has a demon in him. faith. He wants his son to be healed. And then there are the disciples. They weren't able to cast him out. Jesus then says to them, you faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? He's not talking to the dad, he's talking to the disciples. Something has happened as he comes down the mountain. He's come to the people. Moses could have stayed up on the mountain when he got the 10 Commandments. I imagine that was something of a temptation for him, if you will. Just staying there in the perfect presence of God. But he came down the mountain in order to build relationships, in order for people to get the 10 Commandments that were going to connect them with God and with each other. And Jesus does the same. He comes down the mountain and he heals the boy and he begins to show the glory of God. Now, if he had glowed, people would have said, oh, look, the glory of God. But what does that have to do with us? When he comes down and he heals the boy, when he comes down and he does miracles, when he sends out his disciples 2 by 2 to go out and to cast demons and to proclaim the good news, when he lives and he dies and he is raised again, he shows us the glory of God. And it's a glory that's reflected in us. See, if Jesus were glowing and that's how he got everything done, we would say, oh, well, but I don't glow. Within you is the light of God. You got the light of Christ at your baptism. At baptism, we become transfigured. We become the people who go down the mountain into the valley of despair, the valley of death, the valley of hopelessness, and it is a place that needs the light of God. I think ultimately Jesus comes down and is not glowing because it would separate us from him. And the whole point of the incarnation of Jesus is to connect us to God. The holy human and the holy divine one brings the very human us into the divine presence. So when you look in a mirror and you're not glowing, don't let that think you're off the hook. You still are to go out and to do the work of God, to be that light in the world. Jesus taught us the way. And as our collect said today, the point of the transfiguration is that we might carry our cross